Hi, welcome to another edition of the Alan Rosenberg Show. It's time for a new album review, and I'm going to be reviewing the new U2 album that came out a few weeks ago, and this is Song of Surrender. Now, this is the, I guess, limited edition, deluxe edition of it, and this is the 4 CD version. It's numbered, as you can see, I got whatever number that is, 16,806. And this is the 4 CD version. There's different configurations. There's a single CD version. And I'm going to be talking about this pretty unusual collection. Now, I got this album a few weeks ago. As you probably know if you're on my channel, a subscriber, I don't believe in getting an album, listening to it once and reviewing it. It makes no sense. It's not my goal in life to be the first reviewer out there. I want to absorb the album because anybody who's a music fan knows the more you listen to an album, oftentimes the more it grows on you, and you start enjoying it more, which wouldn't be fair to review it after one listen. This album, after hearing it 5 times, which is what I do, it's a tough listen. It's unusual. So let's get into it. If you're new to my channel, or you're not new but you haven't subscribed, please hit subscribe. Please hit that like bell. Would definitely help my channel to grow so I show up. Now, as you can see, I am a fan of U2. I discovered them when they first came out. I have a concert on cassette from WLIR Radio when they played at the Malibu on their first album, or on the October tour. And I've been listening to them ever since. I actually saw them for the first time on the War Tour when I went to SUNY Albany. And they were clearly a band from the get-go, and they even say when they would play a small club, they pretended they were playing Madison Square Garden. They wanted to take over the world. They are the real deal, and I applaud them. I think, in my opinion, this discography is pretty amazing overall, and they deserve all their accolades. I actually think in my lifetime, from the late 70s onward, I think they're probably the most important artists, along with Bruce Springsteen. So that's just my opinion. But here's their discography. There are 17 main albums here. You know, Boy October War, The Live Under a Blood Red Sky, which kind of was a mini album, but certainly is complete now. Unforgettable Fire, Joshua Tree, Rattle and Hum, Achtung Baby, which is my favorite, and I think one of the greatest albums by anybody of all time, Zeropa, Passengers with Brian Eno, the pop album, and their latter-day albums, which I think are largely pretty incredible. You know, U2's the band that everybody loves to hate, but I actually think they're one of the few bands that actually got better as they went along. I think this is their pinnacle right there. But, you know, these albums, you know, All That You Left Behind is incredible. How to Dismantle an Atomic Bomb is really good. No on the Horizon is good. I thought this one, Songs of Innocence, was tremendous. Fantastic record that's totally overlooked, that everybody shit on. This was the first U2 album that I got when it came out that just, I didn't warm up to it. This is Songs of Experience, and I could look at the track listing now and still draw a pretty big blank. So this one, following their whole career, was the first album that it just didn't grab me. You know, these are other albums like Zeropa and Pop are far from great albums, especially coming after Achtung Baby, which was a masterpiece. But I applaud, they're an artist with a capital A, you know, and even Springsteen. I don't like every Springsteen album, but I applaud when they try to do different things, and that's what they did there. And there's still some great tracks on there. This album didn't do much for me, which leads us to Song of Surrender. I don't know what their thought was. This is a lot of work went into this album. They spent 2 full years recording in very different locations, including studios, and I get it. And I actually got this album pretty excited to, you know, I kept an open mind because I know it's getting trashed by so many people, but I don't care. I kept an open mind, and the idea that they're going to strip it down and not just make it like acoustic, but they're actually reinterpreting the songs, and he's changing the lyrics. I'm like, you know what? And it's, you know, he started working on it with his book, Surrender, and I'm like, there might be something to this, and it may be really good. So I've dug into this album a lot. For one thing, again, it's 4 discs. I kind of applaud the fact that each disc is relatively short. I always like that about U2. You know, the CD length could be upwards of close to 80 minutes, and U2 is always like, it's not about the length, it's the quality. And for me, even to this day, you know, a 40-minute album is the perfect length. And that's what you got here. You got 4 different albums, in a sense, 4 different CDs, one for each member of the band, and each one's about 40 minutes. So what I'm finding is if you listen to each individual one individually, it's pretty good. 40 minutes is about the right length. Some of the stuff is really good, some of the stuff is not that good, but it's good. If you try to listen to this whole thing, I can't do it. It's just too samey, it's too monotonous, and it's not grabbing me the way I hoped it would. But if you take it in short doses, you know, if you're in the mood to hear something fairly mellow and you want to hear these songs, you know, stripped down, it's not a bad listen. It's better than, I think, the respect that it's getting. But there is definitely some issues with this. You know, I think U2's always been the most democratic band ever, one of the few bands that they always split the publishing from day one. So Larry Mullen Jr. and Adam Clayton, they get full publishing as if they write all the songs. And I thought that was great. They were like all for one, one for all. You don't see that very often in rock and roll, which is why the songwriters have wealth up to here in the big bands and the drummer, the bass player down here, and it always causes friction. They don't really have that here. So they made this a U2 album, when in reality, to me, it's definitely an Edge Bono project. Larry Mullen Jr., you really don't hear much at all. And Adam Clayton, you don't hear much at all as well. In the end, one of the last songs, you kind of hear some funky bass. This is the packaging. Looks like that. There's 4 CDs in here. There's 2 booklets. Not much to write home about on the booklets. You know, there's an intro from the Edge, what his goal was, what he wanted to do, and then you get lyrics. I'm not a big lyric guy, and Bono did change the lyrics on a lot of these songs, and you could hear it. I'm not the kind of guy who sits there and read lyrics, but you know the song so well, you're like, ooh, it's jarring. You're like, that's changed. Oh, that's changed. And because you're so used to the songs, it's really not for the better, at least in my opinion. So I'm not going to go through, there's 40 songs on here. I will tell you that starting it off is really jarring, because it starts off with one, which is my favorite U2 song of all time, and in fact, it's one of my favorite songs by anybody of all time. When somebody asks me, what's the greatest songs of all time, I put that way up there, by anybody. This is a terrible version of it. I just don't like it at all. It just, I was like jarred. After that, it goes into Where the Streets Have No Name, which is completely reimagined without the legendary guitar lick. You know, I kind of equate it to Mick and Keith doing a solo reinterpretation of Stone stuff, and they do Satisfaction without down, you know, it's like, it's jarring, and it feels like it's really lacking. But I will tell you, after that, it goes into Stories for Boys, you know, 11 O'Clock TikTok, Out of Control, really early stuff. And those reinterpretations are great. Bad, to me, works really well, but it's not all that different. It's just more like acoustic. Every Breaking Way is fine, but that's a great, great song. And for people who don't appreciate Songs from Innocence, that's a good way to rediscover it. Beautiful Day is fine, but that's such a great, powerful song in its original version that it doesn't hold up. And Walk On, well, he completely changed the lyrics for, you know, what's going on in Ukraine, and he did it for Zelensky, and I take my hat off. It's a really nice thing to do, but it doesn't really help the song that much. And Pride in the Name of Love is an amazing track, but the problem is those big classics that are stripped down, none of the versions on this album are superior to the regular version, and I just kind of feel like in my head I'm hearing the regular version, not really grooving to these reinterpreted, you know, stripped down versions. And that's the problem with this album. You know, and I find a lot of the best tracks, like side 2 starts with We're Gonna Ride Your Wild Horse, is a great, great song, and it's really fine on here, but it's very, very similar in a sense to the regular version. You know, Stuck in a Moment You Can't Get Out is another amazing song. It's fine on this version, but it's not better than the original version, and I don't think that's what their goal was, and I'm not exactly sure what their goal was. Sometimes You Can't Make Up Your Own is another great song. Invisible, City Blinding Lights is really good. But they're fine versions, but they're not as good as the originals. You hear the originals in your head, at least I do, and it doesn't make me want to play these versions instead of the other ones. You know, side 3 starts off with Vertigo, which is an incredible opening track from Dismantled Atomic Bomb, and that's one of the most straight driving rock songs from U2, which I love that because Edge always had this classic Edge guitar sound, and certainly on the early albums, you know, in my opinion, it got a little bit annoying. It was very samey, and the latter day albums like this, I found more experimental. Even on these, they changed their sound up and they continued to grow, and that's a great quality to experiment and expand your sound. They do it on here with Vertigo, where they use the cello, but it just doesn't work. Still haven't found what I'm looking for. Well, that already was redone on Rattle and Hum as a gospel song, and it was great. You know, Electrical Storm is a phenomenal track, and it's really good on here, but it's so reminiscent of the other version that, you know, on the greatest hits that I'm not showing here. You know, The Fly is different because on Octung Baby that's really electronic, and here's a more stripped down version that does work. If God Will Send His Angels is fine. Desire doesn't really work. Until the End of the World's a great song. All I Want Is You is one of those lost classic, in my opinion, U2 songs that's from Rattle and Hum. That's amazing on Rattle and Hum. An album that I never understood got trashed. I think it's a great album. But All I Want Is You is a masterpiece, and it's really good on here, but it's still very similar. So maybe it'll help people rediscover it. Peace on Earth is another amazing track that probably a lot of people forgot about. It's from that album. Great to hear it on here, but not that much different than the original version. The dramatic ones like With or Without You, nah. Stay Far Away So Close is different. It's funny, I was playing it earlier, and my wife comes on, she goes, oh, is that Leonard Cohen? And I'm like, you know what, that's really funny. And it's kind of reminiscent, because Bono, on a lot of these songs, he's singing at this really deep register. And, you know, The Edge said that's part of the reason why they did it, because his voice changed. But I don't really know, because halfway through the song, he's singing in a very similar register that he normally sings in. So to me, it's almost like that deeper register is almost forced on this album unnecessarily. And it doesn't really work that well. Lights of Home is great. Cedarwood Road is a great track. You know, I Will Follow is kind of cool on here. It's a very unplugged version, and it works. Miracle Drug's a great song, but not that great on here. Two Hearts Beat of One is interesting, but it's more percussive, and, you know, it's basically like the original version, but a little bit lighter. Not that tremendously dramatic, I think, and it ends with 40, which is a great track, but it was always a great track. So I have mixed feelings. You know, I'm not out to trash this album, as I lose my background. I'm not out to trash this album. It's an interesting experiment. I think it's going to go down as a... I mean, in the United States, it opened at number 5 on the Billboard chart, which is pretty good in today's world. The second week, it left the charts completely, so it's not a success. Worldwide, the album has topped the charts all over the world, including in the UK, so it's far from a dismal failure, but I don't think it has any legs. Clearly, in the United States, dropping off the charts in 1 week is not showing much legs. How would I describe this album? It's not terrible. It's certainly not great. Out of all of these U2 albums, it's probably the least that I would ever put on. Am I glad I have it? Sure. I'm going to file it away now that I listened to it 5 times, and realistically, I'm probably never going to listen to it very often. I kind of think that it's a confusing album. There's some unplugged stuff on here that's really good. Why didn't they just do an unplugged album? I did a video on my favorite unplugged albums. There's a ton of great ones out there, and they could have done that, and it would have been more of a homogeneous listen. It's an unplugged U2 album. We're going to tone those songs down and done it live, and that could have worked really well. But in this case, you don't have that. You have reinterpretations that are completely different. Bono singing in a different key, different registers. Sometimes it works, sometimes it don't. Sometimes it's the regular versions, but they're kind of unplugged-like, and it's just a jumble. I don't feel that it's a unified album. And as much as I love U2, and I do, I can't sit through all 4 of these discs in one listen. It's just, no. And this is an album. it should be able to do that. Because only 4 discs of 40 minutes is still only 2.5 hours, which is a long listen. But there are double CDs that are just slightly length than that. So if it was really great, it would be doable, but it's not. So there's my take on U2's Song of Surrender. Is it as bad as a lot of people say? No. Is it a confusing mess in a sense? Yeah, I think it kind of is. I don't hold it against the band for doing something different and reinterpreting their songs, but it's not a unified album, certainly over these 40 tracks. But I'm glad I have it, and maybe once in a blue moon when I feel like getting close to hearing a U2 Unplugged set, this is as close as I'm going to get. And some of it is pretty damn good, but none of it, there's not a single song on here that I think supplants the classic versions. And that's an issue. So let me know what you think. U2, I think one of the greatest stories in latter-day rock and roll history, from the 80s onward. And I'm wearing a Las Vegas hat because they always want to be at the forefront of everything and technology, and they're going to be opening up the Sphere in Las Vegas. And my hunch is that it's going to be one of the greatest shows and spectacles of all time, and they're going to be at the forefront doing that. And then other bands are going to follow their lead. They've always been innovators live. I think it would be awesome to see that show. I'm sure I won't be able to, but it would be nice if I could. So I guess they wanted to do something different with this. Doesn't totally work. Let me know what you think. Please hit subscribe. Please hit like. Check out my other videos. And if you're a fan of U2 and you listen to this album, let me know what you think. I know that U2's the favorite band out there to hate. I don't know really why, except maybe they're pretentious and Bono, to a lot of people, feels self-important. But they are pretentious sometimes. But when you're as good as this, and a leader, and fearless, and a true artist that does like to do different things and spread their wings, and they're a special band for sure. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think. Have a great rest of the weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks for watching the Alan Rosenberg Show. I greatly appreciate your support. Love your comments, and please hit subscribe so my little tiny channel of 2.5 years can continue to grow a little bit. Thanks so much. I'll see you next time.